a 1 minute dive into my story. It's a bit long, but sort of all of this started in 2014. I had quit my job, which only lasted about 6 months, and I moved to a little village outside of Bangalore, about 15 kilometers away. The village is called Banjarapalya, and just started staying there with another organization, and started noticing that 15 kilometers of distance is enough, such that even though Bangalore is the IT hub of the country, 15 kilometers away, nobody has touched a computer. And that was a little bit interesting for me. And we did a series of experiments just to see how people respond to technology. When you put a few computers, when you let people play with phones, what happens? And a lot of these experiments ended up making us even more curious as to what our own prejudices are about who can use technology, and people in the villages, and what are they capable of, and can they actually be able to be the forerunners of great technology and great education. And it turned out that we were able to create a space that was actually run by the same people in the village who were now creating education of high quality for themselves and using the internet while doing so. That's where the story started in the briefest possible way.
We have a whole segment where we dive into the exact story and the events that led to the project that you're building today. But first, I want to take a bit of time to uncover the human behind this story. What are 3 hashtags that define your work or hobbies?
3 hashtags. It's hard. I guess challenge would be one. I think anything I do and anything that I've done so far, if I get bored doing it, I just can't do it. So all of my work, all of the projects I've built so far have been things that I felt personally challenged me, not only in terms of the skill I needed to do it, but also the person I needed to be able to do it. And of course, the second most important bit has been to experiment with collaboration and to see, and in a way that is also a challenge, to challenge how people think about other people and how they think about what other people are actually capable of doing. In places that they would not imagine. Once when we started our first Nook, people were surprised that there are these Instructables coming out of a village out of nowhere, and these Instructables are actually getting featured, and these kids are getting T-shirts from being sent to them, and that gives a certain amount of pleasure to me. It's a little bit naughty, I guess, but it is nice that way. I can't think of the third one right now, but I'm sure something along the same lines. All right.
What did you learn in the last year that had a wow effect on you?
The last year was important for us, for me also as a person. So we started 2014, and by the end of 2014, we had created a space which I did not understand. Like, it was basically working. Groups of people from the village coming, making things, learning themselves, but I just didn't understand how it happened. How does it, what's the story, what happens behind the scene that makes this thing tick? Then I spent 2015 trying to understand what was that, and then I started diving into the history of education and trying to get an idea of why are things the way they are. And then I started understanding that it is quite obvious that people will learn themselves, because you don't really need education for learning and all of that. And then last year is, by last year we had actually tried out creating more than one Nook. So the first Nook then became 2 Nooks, and then we tried out in a refugee camp in Uganda and created a Nook there. And then we saw that working. That gave that kind of confidence that yes, it can literally go anywhere, and it has the possibility to create impact at a scale that I had not even imagined until then. So it was quite a turning point. It was also the time when we formally took Project DEFY as an organization and a name, and were able to say that, okay, this is what our mission is. This is what we'll do. We'll create and help more and more communities create their own nooks, and go forward with that.
So this happened in 2017. That's when
2016 to 2017, and then as we go towards the end, we've done a few more. So this is now our 6th Nook, and
wow,
yeah,
cool. So you mentioned slightly in both previous questions that I asked, kind of the story leading to you doing this project, and the fact that you wonder what happens a few kilometers away from Bangalore, and then the process that you went through from 2015, 2016, and so on. I wonder, what's your personal why? What drives you to get into the education and do something at the personal level?
Yeah, I think generally most people would answer that question out of some sort of a I want to help other people sort of a way. It's absolutely not me, actually. For me, this is actually something that makes me very angry or pisses me off a lot, the way the system works. And that is because I at a very early age, I was able to see 2 very different forms of education. So in Mumbai, I went to school, and somehow this school was fairly open-minded, and you could discuss anything. And you went out a lot, and it was not so rigid, and rules were not the most important thing. The teachers actually cared about your learning.
What school was that?
This is in Chembur, school called Swami Vivekanand. And then moving from Mumbai, and having that sort of a life in Mumbai where you do what you want. You're making your own choices, even as a less than 18-year-old. But then you go to college, and I went to university in Vellore, and suddenly, even after being over 18, all these choices are taken away from you, and the college is trying for its own whatever personal agenda to get you into a job. Doesn't even ask you whether you want a job, and all that. And it made me feel very weird and frustrated. But I saw that very few people were really frustrated with that everybody else was totally okay with it. And I started realizing that, I was lucky to have gone to a different kind of school, because the others did not feel any difference between their school and the university, and they were restricted through their school life and continued being restricted through college. And that is where I started feeling the first bits of anger for the system and the way it functions. And eventually, when I could see that it can function differently, then that anger sort of switched into resolve of trying to probably create a true alternative.
So in this last years, since you built Project DEFY, what is one belief that you formed and that you believe a lot of people will disagree with?
People can teach themselves. They can be trusted with their own education. This may seem like something that is, why not? Of course they can be trusted, but they're not. Education systems, and even in the best of the education systems, are not created by people. They're created by a few people who are at the top of the brass, who are sitting in air-conditioned rooms and deciding what everybody else should be learning, without thinking of what their context is, where they come from, what are the realities in which they have to live. But if you let people create their own learning, it works. And it has worked even before. It's not something that we are doing it for the first time. It has worked many times before in the past in human history. But yes, at this given point of time, a lot of people disagree with that. And a lot of people find it very challenging to accept that a 5-year-old can actually think about what he or she wants to learn, and that you don't have to tell him or her to educate that kid.
Now let's try to dive deeper into what Project DEFY is. Can you describe at the kind of umbrella level or a global level what the project is, how is it organized, and what do you guys actually do in your day-to-day operations?
Yeah, it's a Well, we are sort of in India with a small team of 6 or 7 people. Um, and we decided a little bit early on that we will not try to create spaces for ourselves. That we will not try to create all these nooks, just expand, and become like a giant empire of maker spaces in the world. That did not appease us so much. So instead, what we saw that once we created the first 2 nooks, we started getting requests, and requests were coming from communities. Not just like people with money or companies, but actually from grassroots, asking that, hey, this would be really nice in our community. Could you help us build it? And we felt, okay, let's do this. We are very good at creating a nook. We are also very good at disappearing from it, and which means that we might be able to help more communities create their own learning spaces without us running them, and completely leave it to them. So that's what we do. We receive requests from communities, from organizations working in those communities to create a nook. Each nook takes 8 months of work to set up, but only 1 month on the ground. The rest are all virtual, and we do that very purposely so that the nook and the people in the nook don't get attached to us and don't expect that we will keep things running. So we have done in that fashion sort of 6 so far, of which 3 are for other communities, and we don't even finance them. And going forward, all the new nooks will be like that. We'll be doing in a library in the city.
So basically, a nook is a learning space.
Yes,
right? Okay.
It is a learning collaboration space. It looks like this. It has tools, computers, internet, lots of trash, and people, most importantly, but also a culture.
And nook stands for something like the word itself. How do you...
Nook is also an English word, which is like a corner, but it's more appealing from what we actually took it from is nukkad, which is a Hindi word. Nukkad is sort of this little tea shop or one place where in the village where everybody would gather after their work, and they would all sit together and be like sort of freely express and talk and chit chat and gossip. But it's a cultural melting pot, and it somehow breaks a lot of boundaries. And we felt that would be something that we want this space to be. It's not just a technological space with tools, but actually a place where people can express and be themselves.
Very interesting. So you mentioned a bit the curiosity on what drove you to start wandering around villages and how people would use technology. Is there any specific moment in time that you can recall that you said, okay, we're going to set up Project DEFY, it's going to be like a full-time thing and we're doing it? Like, what was the moment when you decided this is something that needs to be done?
So once our first space was set up in 2014, I decided that I'll go away from it to see if it can function without my presence. And the end of 2014, I actually went off, and I was not around in the space for 3 months, and I had basically left completely, like permanently. But 3 months later, I came back to Bangalore and I decided I'll go and see the space. When I went there, of course, I went with the thinking that, the laptops would be broken, the tools would be missing, the people would have vanished. But none of that happened. When I went there were more people than before. Laptops had broken down, they fixed it. There were more tools than before, more projects than before. The community had actually put more things into the space than taking out of it. So the tools we never purchased, more tools came in. But the most important thing, which sort of made me realize that, yes, we can do a lot, is all the new people who were in the space did not even know I started it, right? They had no idea who I was. And so I walked in, a few people recognizing me because they were there for a long time, but basically as nobody. And that was a very happy moment for me, which meant that the community had complete... that it was not Abhijit who had to be the owner, founder, runner of the space, that they had actually taken over.
So what do you think happened there? Like what sort of values and what actions were implemented early on to allow the community to take over?
Well, it was... Well, in the first time, there were a lot of trials and errors. Now we know a little bit on how this approach is, of how we don't give answers and let people sort of figure out and let them struggle through the process. But in the first attempt, it was a lot of things which would work. So sort of when things started, and my first sort of belief points in self-learning started coming when I used to sort of play games at the Nook in the village on my phone while having my tea, and these kids who would get out of school around the same time, they would just keep watching, what I'm doing with my phone, and after a few days, one of them asked for the phone, and I gave it to the kid, and sort of we were surrounded by all the other kids, and when I peep in, after 15 minutes, they're playing Temple Run like pros, and nobody has a smartphone in the village. How did they manage that?
Cool. So they just by observing your behavior.
Just observing. And then we did the same experiment, but this time with laptops, and without telling them what to do with those laptops.
So this is kind of in line with Sugata
Mitra's, hole in the wall.
System.
So they came, and 3 hours they were playing games on the internet. There was no games in the laptop.
Wow. All right. So maybe someone is listening to this and thinking, okay, maybe you had a specific context or knowledge and you can do it, but maybe they are alone and they don't really have resources and stuff. So in this context, I want to ask, were there any specific people around you that made this possible, and how exactly did they contribute?
Yes, there were. But see, because we never started with an idea. When I started, there was no concept that this will be a self-learning space or whatever. It was just experiments. And I think I would owe Jaga a lot, and especially Freeman, who was running the show in the
Jaga
village.
is the farm.
Yeah, the farm. But it used to be in a different place than what it is now.
All right.
And I could do these experiments because my friends there let me use their laptops, and Freeman let me use the space and the internet with these kids without expecting an outcome, without knowing what will happen. And these people who sort of trust in you without expecting that sort of outcome, a clear idea, those are very important, more important than any money or anything else, because you need to experiment. You cannot know what will turn out to be. I started with no money. I mean, at that time, the only money left in my account was about 50 or 100 rupees. But I had a place to stay and food to eat, so I was not starving. And so it is possible to start. I'm sure, and a lot of people have, with worse situations than mine. But it's always very important to find that first few people who will believe in you without worrying about the idea for some time, at least.
So besides the concept of self-organized learning environments in Sugata Mitra, what other thinkers or educators or schools inspired the work you do?
So mainstream government schools inspired the work I do.
It made you angry.
Yeah, they made me hate it so much that I had no choice. But yes, there are various ways of approaching education. The problem is that we stick to only one. And the problem is that after such a long time using this standard form of education in India, we just don't know how to challenge it anymore. We don't know how to change it anymore. And that's a big problem. You don't need a great education system. You just need an education system that can be constantly changed. Right? Because even the best one will need to be changed at some point. So that is what I sort of feel, that yes, self-learning is a good form because it is democratic. Because each individual in any group would have a very unique set of needs and interests. And no matter how great a curriculum you may make, you can never cater to everybody's unique combination. And you'll end up creating a funnel through which only some will be able to pass and some will not. As opposed to that, the next best step is to let them create their own choices and education.
I see. So Were there any early struggles and failures that you had, and how did you overcome them?
Lots of struggles. I mean, the fact that it was really hard to get women and girls to come to the space in the beginning. I remember that there were times when the girls would stop coming, and their brothers would tell me that, she can't come because she has to clean utensils and wash clothes, and I would lose it, and I'm like, okay, you also don't come. Come only if your sister can come, and if not. And after a few days, then I would actually walk into the house and start screaming in a language that they don't understand. I can't understand them either. They're speaking Kannada, I'm speaking English, but I'm screaming at the top of my voice, saying that how can you not let your girl leave the house? Like, this is just not right. It took all that.
So is it cultural? Is it related to...
Cultural. It is related to also a little bit of politics.
I see.
Like, we pissed off the local school headmaster a lot because firstly, we never invited him to cut a ribbon, so he felt bad, I guess.
I see.
And that the kids voluntarily were spending 4 or 5 hours in the space, and he felt that how come they're going there and spending time and they don't like to come to school. They were still going to school.
Maybe they thought that you were stealing away the homework time or something.
Or at least the ego was hurt.
I see.
So
yes. The kids that we also saw in the space today, they also
all the
go
kids
to
here
school.
All the kids here are homeschooled. They're all here the whole day.
Okay.
And
so they're part of the Protovillage.
Yeah. So, and that happens a lot, that even in usual villages, some kids go to school, some drop out. And then the adults who also come, who have never been to school.
So can you explain a bit the context of this Nook and the Protovillage? What is this space, and how did you come to build a Nook here?
This is an interesting story. So we have a common friend called Bilal.
Yes.
Who you might know. Most people in this makerspace world have heard of this crazy guy.
He's amazing.
He's amazing. Him. Yeah. Bilal has been a very good friend. And in fact, he walked into our first space even before we told anybody we have the space. Right? Somehow he managed to come there. And
where was it?
In Banjarafalya. In year one. And he came there, and since then we talked, and we used to keep chatting, checking in with each other, what's happening and what's not. And then he got some sort of a fellowship in India, where he met Kalyan, who's the founder of Protovillage. And Bilal and I, we had already discussed that if it's India, then might as well we do a Nook together, so that we can collaborate in that way. So then he brought in Kalyan, and Kalyan already had this space, and he really wanted to make a space as well. So it all fit really well, and Bilal said, hey, this is a good maker space to have, and it's not super expensive. It actually engages people in learning as opposed to just making or a hobby. So we did that, but that meant that we went through discussions and proposal writing with the funding organization for a few months. And finally, about 3.5 weeks ago, we were able to actually start. And for the first time, I walked in to this room and we started setting it up. So
wow. It's a long way to get
it
there.
is, and it is quite a...
So you mentioned that every time there needs to be a community that has a request or an interest, and then you step in and you help set up the Nook, the self-organized learning space.
Yeah.
Are there any criteria or a filter that you have in how you set up a new space? Like kind of a checkbox, I don't know.
We have a very long list of things that help us sort of prioritize. Also because we have received quite a few requests. I think our list of requests is more than 20 now.
Which is good or challenging?
Which is good but challenging, because we are still small and we still don't have so much capacity to do even 2 Nooks parallelly. We have to do one at a time. But it's even more challenging because some of the projects, some of the requests, and some of the best ones actually are coming from places where there's no money. They don't have funds to do it. And each Nook costs somewhere between $15,000 to $16,000, and somebody needs to raise that.
So how is this budget formed? It's mostly tools, equipment,
Also
laptops?
operations for 1 full year.
Okay.
So it is we ask for that so that it doesn't get stuck in between 1 year. So they should have enough money to run for 1 full year.
And what would that mean? Like operations for 1 year to like a space manager or learning coach or?
Yeah, there's an admin or a Nook manager, as we call them, whose job is to make sure that space is safe and it's open and closed at the time it needs to be, and that people interact with each other.
Do you also put in the materials that will be used within a year, like, I don't know, wood, electronics?
That's where it's interesting that we buy the first set of very basic material, and then the money is in the hands of the community. They choose what to buy. So every month they purchase what they want.
I see. All right. So because I had this question next, like how was Project DEFY or the Nooks financed till today? And
in all sorts of ways, from individuals, organizations, companies.
So the community itself, or grants, or the organization?
Yeah, mostly outside. The first round of money, I think, is usually easier to get from outside the community. But then the community may, in a few years, be able to raise its own money or generate enough revenue that it can cover it. Like the operation cost of each Nook is not more than $500 a month. You can actually generate that much money back.
So to this point, you mentioned that you can only set up a Nook at the time, and it takes you about 6 months of intervention, and then you step back, and they need to have about a year of budget to run.
Yes.
So do you plan to multiply that to like have more people, or can you do it in an open source way where you have a toolkit and other people can set up spaces in other countries? What is your thinking?
Both.
About that?
I mean, so when I say that we can do only one Nook at a time, it means that that from the 8 months, there's 1 month that we have to be on the ground, and that should not overlap with another Nook, where we have to be on the ground as well.
I see.
So actually, we can do one Nook every month.
I see.
Right, because the other parts are virtual.
So you have work for the next 20 months.
We have
right?
But it all depends on feasibility and finance, and also sometimes the situation in the place as well. We are trying to do both, in terms that we are trying to train people firstly within our organization to be able to do it independently, and sort of at least do this 1 month, which is the trickiest part on the ground. And once we feel that we are able to train people, then we want to open source it. That's why actually it's called Project DEFY and not just DEFY, because at some point we want it to end. Or that Project DEFY should not be needed after a point. That you don't need the inventor of the fan now to sell fans, right? Or for fans to be in different places. Nooks should be able to be created by anybody who's interested to create it, and all the knowledge and information you need should be available online. But we have still not yet reached that point where we can explain it so well. Besides bringing someone and actually spending time with them and making them a part of the space.
So now I want to dive a bit into the whole topic of curriculum. So you mentioned that the first month is critical to set up a space. What happens in that first month? Like, do you have workshops? Do you have activities? How is the space organized?
Yeah, it's very loose. I mean, we generally don't do any workshops. The first month we do run something called an induction program, but there's 2 goals of this first month. One is for people to start doing things without being instructed to, which means that needs a lot of unschooling to get away from this habit of being told what to do. And the second is to be able to govern the space themselves, to manage the space themselves. So self-learning and self-governance, and this has to be started. So there are a set of things, or basically I would say questions that need to be asked at different points of time. So for example, when we walked into the space, everybody comes here and like, okay, what do we do? Okay, let's clean up. Okay, fine, let's clean up. The walls look empty. What do we do? Okay, let's paint. Okay, how do we paint? Okay, everybody paints. Okay, everybody paints. And it's just asking questions all the time. And okay, now this is done. What do we do? All these tools are around. Okay, let's put the tool somewhere. So find a way to put the tool somewhere. Now the tools are put. Somebody starts asking questions that, okay, already actually here there were two kids who picked up the motor and started making a boat. Boat sinked. What do we do? And it just keeps happening. And so there's no fixed way in which all the nooks will be created, but there's some important questions. Like after the first 10 days, we ask, okay, how do you feel?
And are these questions purely coming from the children and their curiosity, or you try to also connect it to like the community context and trying to have projects that will solve something in the community? Like, where's the balance between playing around and just answering your own questions versus kind of contributions and projects at a bigger scale?
Yeah, I mean, the questions also come from me and us, but at the same time, there's the challenge somewhere lies in because many people are going to be tinkering and playing with these things for the first time, which means if they take a really challenging project, they're going to get stuck and feel really demotivated. So they usually start with small projects and they try to solve their own problems, right? So they live here. This is their sort of smaller community, and they have challenges that they would like to solve. There's a guy who said, okay, at night it gets really dark and kids have to go from this end to that end to go and sleep. So what do we do? Said, okay, I would like to make a light that will start glowing in the night. All right. Then he said, okay, but also animals are coming in sometimes, and we are a little bit worried. We should have some way of checking. Said, okay, then I would maybe make something that can detect animals. And then he asked me the question. I said, never ask me a question until you have done the first two steps. The first step is you ask somebody else, and the second step is you Google. I'm going to be third. After you've done the first two, then ask me. Generally, first two is enough. And hopefully it becomes more and more enough to ask the others and who are around in the space and ask the internet. So we build that habit and we slowly try to take a back seat and not try to tell them what to do. Let them make the mistakes and figure out from there.
What was the feedback so far? Because in almost every country around the world, parents have a lot of pressure and expectation when it comes to what my child will learn, what's the curriculum, what competences they develop for the future, and so on. So based on these 6 nooks that you build and the freedom that you give children to play and learn, what was the feedback from their parents? Like, are they worried? Are they supportive?
Well, at this point, we have received all sorts of feedback. The most funny ones were when in the beginning the parents used to say, why don't you hit my kid, like beat him, because if he's not being beaten, he's not really learning, because that's how they understand their school education is. And like, okay, he goes to school, he gets beaten, he learns. Why is he coming here not getting beaten? How will he learn? Right? That was, you would not imagine that to be a feedback. That is a feedback that we got. But also, of course, yes, the moment grades drop, and the first thing to blame would be the other place that he spends most of his or her time in. So yes, there is all sorts of worry from the kids, from the parents, sometimes from the school who does not like you, and we get very, very different feedbacks. But then sometimes parents also join the kids and learn. They become learners too at the space. We have seen that as well. But what we see happening more as a pattern is that whatever obstacle may be produced in front of the kid by the parent, by the school, by whoever, if the kid really wants to come and really likes coming, the kid will find a way to come. Maybe not today, maybe not for the next 1 month, 2 months later, you'll see his face, right? And this keeps happening again and again. Everybody who's been forced to go back home or stay at home and not come to the space, they came. It just takes time. And giving them that time and not telling them that, hey, if you don't come, you're going to lose a lot, helps them to feel, okay, I belong here, I can come whenever I want.
So Related to the curriculum and the activities that they did so far, do you have any stories that you're proud of, like some activities or some projects that the kids did and you said, wow, I really should continue my work because that's why we do it?
Yeah, I mean, nowadays I don't get to see so many projects because I start and I go away. But in the early part, the story I always tell, there was this 10 or 11-year-old boy. He had a broken remote control car. And he walked into the space one day with the car, said, I'm going to fix it. And he actually fixed an RF remote control by himself, 11-year-old kid. And then is when the magic happened. And he says, I don't like this car. He takes out the assembly from inside the car, makes his own car with plastic bottles, fits it in there, and now he runs his own car with RF controlled remote, totally hacked together by 11-year-old kid. That was like a major, like anything is possible. If that kid can be so motivated to do something and actually do it, then, well, others can as well. And it makes it worth.
Is it one of the goals that you have, that kids get enough confidence to be able to build whatever they want?
Well, building is one aspect of it. I feel that there's a parallel between taking control of your education and making and building to taking control of your life. That if they can feel enough confidence that they can build something, whatever they want, then they can also feel confident that they can be whoever they want and whatever the conditions they live in. Taking control of your education is the first part of taking control of your life, and so yes, it is really important that they start believing that yes, it's possible, but also being responsible about what they build, and just not build for the sake of building it, but rather for a purpose that is important to them.
I see. Now let's shift the gear a bit and look into the future. So what are your plans to scale this impact, not necessarily in numbers, but in quality or in reaching out to other people and so on? So how do you plan to grow?
Yeah, as I said, we really need to figure out better ways of explaining people how to create the space and training more people to do it. We need to be better also in getting partners at a larger level, so that we don't have to, like, each Nook does not have to raise funds. We can raise funds for like 10 Nooks, 20 Nooks at a time. And that should be possible. It's not that much money actually. But this whole communication is a challenge, and we need to be, because it is so different and it's so hard to explain sometimes that it takes a 1 hour conversation
to no, you have a short really good video that it's on the website, and everything that you want to mention out of this interview we'll put in the show notes, and with links to the website, all the social media and all the resources that might be available. So this interview is more to go deeper into the story, but I think you do a good job at explaining what the Nook is on the website.
Yeah, so we have to just get better, even better at that.
Is there, if we imagine, let's say that for the sake of the experiment, and I'm actually interested that I want to become part of your project and set up a Nook in I come from Eastern Europe, so let's say in Eastern Europe. What qualities are you looking for? What is the type of, like, the profile of people that you're looking for?
Well, firstly, that you believe that it's important for that place.
All right.
That is the first step. And then, so the sort of 8-month process has a 2 months at the beginning. So the induction is actually month 3. The first 2 months is trying to understand the community.
All right.
And so if you say that, okay, I would like to do a Nook here and, come over and do it. We would say, okay, tell us what the community is like. Who is the one who's in most trouble, right? Who is most marginalized? We want to start with people who are in the worst position in the community, because we want them to come first and then everybody else to come into their space. That breaks the whole, power dynamics that makes the space truly equal for everybody to use. So that is really important. And of course that we will need the first one or two people who will really spearhead the project, and we will sit basically behind the curtain whispering into their ears what to do, and let them sail the boat. So passionate people, passionate you, a community of problems, and people who don't fit so well in the society, and the last is money, funding, which it would need to set up. And if the context is really different, Eastern Europe will be quite different from India, then we spend a little bit more time trying to understand on one side what the feasibility of the space is, how much it will cost differently there, but at the same time, how would people react differently and what might be their goals that they would like to achieve. The best part about Nooks is it doesn't have so much of a definition. Each person in the Nook defines it differently, and so they will want their own definitions of it, but we should try to understand what might they be and start with some of those expectations. So yeah.
And do you plan to have also any form of like open source library where people can see guides, toolkits, and start independently from you?
Yeah, we are writing a lot of that, but every time we write it and we try to show it, we that's what I meant, that we are still not doing a good job in explaining the approach. We can say that, okay, do this in the induction program, but the real challenge is you might actually should not do some of those things when you go to the community, because the context might require you to not do it. But how do you understand that? How do you teach someone this approach? The best way I've found so far is people who use the space understand that very subconsciously. And I understand it very subconsciously. I can't even explain it so well that, okay, you go there, do this, but don't do it, if the situation changes. Like it's a little bit diabolical. What somebody really needs to be able to do is to have a really good eye and to notice things and to ask and listen more than go there to teach. So we are trying to create open source material. We are trying to create, as I said, like this whole thing, eventually we want to make it open source so that either organizations or people can take it up and also do it, because there's no way in hell that we're going to cover all of Earth. And so, yes, let others do it as well. And then, of course, I see that already some of the projects that we worked with and we set up before, they are starting to create more spaces, but not really together with us. So that is also good, that then they are scaling that idea independently, because once they saw us work together, they could do more of that. We still say that, take our help, because it is still, you might end up making a little bit of a mess, but...
So to look into the future of, like, at the system level, what you tell in your story, it looks more like it's about holistic human development and taking charge of your own life more than just education. And you seem to be a bit pissed off by the system and the education as a general rule. So anyway, I want to ask, what are your thoughts about the future of education at this society or country level, specifically in India, where we have so many young people that are in schools, will enter schools soon, and then will try to make a living based on the knowledge that they get there. So what are your thoughts about the future of this?
It is still a difficult future. It is still a big challenge, because even now, most people who are trying to change education are trying to make changes in the system, not trying to change the system, or remove the system. That is a big challenge, because if you try to fix something and that something is not really broken, it actually works perfectly. The education system works the way it was designed. So trying to fix it is a big waste of time. And if we keep trying to do that again and again and again, we're not getting anywhere. We've tried it for 70 years and we still haven't been able to really change our education in any big way. And we don't yet have a critical mass trying to do that. And it is sort of our job to help not only us do these self-learning spaces and alternative schools, but help others to do as well. Because ultimately, you need a critical mass saying that, okay, the system doesn't work, and there are alternatives.
What needs to happen that we have a critical mass?
Discussion and talking. Unfortunately, something that I don't enjoy so much, but this topic of learning has to be brought as a discussion to just regular people, not to all these big people, heads of institutions and all. This has to become discussion of people.
An amazing bridge in here, because my next question was, what should be the role of parents and community within this challenges that we face in education and learning in general?
Parents and community, and if you're talking about education of kids, they have to first become good listeners. Listening to kids is the best you can do to
and how
help.
Do we do it when in our culture, in a lot of countries, the old and wise have authority over everything and you cannot question them?
You have to show them how. Like, you have to show them what happens when a kid makes his own decisions and how different that looks. That is the reason why we are doing these spaces. It is just a big demonstration of kids taking control and people taking control of their own learning and making their own choices, and that working out. And that as a parent, you can support that. It is just a change of role. You still are old and wise. Nobody's saying that you're not. But instead of forcing somebody to do something, use it as an opportunity to be a friend and suggest and help the person go through the challenges. And you can see that happening. A lot of parents are changing their roles and becoming not such authoritative figures, but really good friends who are able to suggest and use their experience to help the student or the kid go through a tough growing period. But yes, it will not happen overnight. It will not be that we'll brainwash everybody in a day. But we can show and prove and let more and more people see it. And we just have to find a good way to show it, because you can't always come to a village to see what's happening. We have to somehow find a way to communicate this.
Now let's try to kind of summarize the key ideas of the conversation and try to give some insights for people who are listening and are curious to maybe get in touch, do something similar. So first, do you have any must-read books or maybe some movies or resources that inspired you and you would recommend for people who want to jump into work that is similar to yours?
I have a sort of a awkward opinion on this, that books are great and other people's opinions are also great. But it's better if you look for opinions after you've experimented than to experiment after looking for opinions. That creates a lot of bias. And
I see.
That is why I think that most people try to change the education system or make it better, or try to go into the school and make it look better, feel better, because they read all these books which say that, hey, we have to fix the system. But yes, if you are to look at it from my point of view.
What about the saying that you should not reinvent the bicycle and
by all means reinvent the bicycle? I mean, come on. What's wrong with that?
Okay, cool.
Do not reinvent the wheel or do not reinvent the bicycle is a capitalist statement. Aimed at creating efficiency, not life.
Okay. So it's like good enough, it's good, and we should go on.
Yeah, create the bicycle. What will happen? I mean, you have time.
Yeah. All right. That's interesting. What would be I guess in this last question, you already shared a message to aspiring educators and Nook creators around the world. But still, if someone is listening now and you can address them directly, as it would be face to face, what would be your advice? Let's say they are a young parent or they're retired grandpa who are really concerned about the future of their grandchildren because they see what's happening in the economy and the future of work and all these trends. And they want to do something. They have time, they have the interest, and they want to do something. Where do they start? What do they do?
Start learning. A good learner makes for a good learning system, or even a good teacher. If you're a parent and you're a grandparent, or whoever, or even a teacher, the reason things may not be working out is because you're not able to look at that process from the point of view of the student, from the point of view of the child, from the point of view of the learner. Be a learner yourself, be a child yourself, and everything then starts making sense. Even especially when people in my sort of field try to do something for people who are poor, or from underprivileged backgrounds, or underserved communities. Don't do it for somebody else. If you can become a part of that community, do that, and then do it for yourself, and everybody else benefits from it as well. Nothing can motivate you to do something more than that. I couldn't have possibly created the first space if I was not living in that village with almost no money, and not eating the same food, and not living the same life. That is a bit important. So dive in.
You mentioned the point of view. And let's do an exercise, like an empathy exercise, where you step in the shoes of other people and you answer from their point of view.
Okay.
So first, imagine you are a teenager or a student in a public school, and it pisses you off. You're bored. You know that you can do more than that. How do you organize your learning in alternative ways? What do you do? And specifically, let's make it more specific for this area. You don't really have resources or internet at home or computer. How do you organize your learning? What do you do about it?
I've heard of some very funny stories in which children were able to actually walk up to their parents and convince them that they have to quit school. Right? In India. I mean, imagine that. It is possible. But whether you're able to convince your parents or not, I think once you walk up to the people who are deciding your life for you and say that, hey, this is what I want. I understand what is happening. I'm not doing this out of anger, or but I really strongly feel that the school is not working for me. Talk to your parents, whether they say yes or no, but you have made a strong statement to yourself that yes, that point has reached, and I understand
the
it.
Problem.
Yes, and if you still be in school, then you have to keep talking, and you have to keep trying to convince the people who are controlling your life to leave some of that control and to let you make some of these decisions. And then there are lots of places to go to learn. There are places where you can learn and actually just at Nooks, at other alternative schools in India and outside. But the first step will be to open the cage, and unfortunately, the cage is made by the people you love, and it is hard to do that because there's going to be a lot of crying and a lot of shouting and in some cases even beating and. But it's an important step to take. And I've seen that people who have done that at some point in their life are able to live more happily.
Let's try now to face the dragon or the tiger. Imagine you become the Minister of Education in India. What are the first 3 laws or actions that you put in place?
Super. Stop schools.
All right.
Take the money and give it to communities to make their own learning spaces.
All right.
And deconstruct the Ministry of Education.
All right. So these are, I'm recalling now, these basically are ideas that I found also in the Schooling Society by Ivan Illich.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote it in, I think, 72, where he basically advocates for like canceling the Ministry of Education and creating a system by which you take the public money and you give it to every person to spend in whichever way they want.
I should have read that. I have not.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a nice book. It's a bit critical, but it's great. Now, imagine you have the superpower to buy all the advertising in the world. Like just for 1 minute, you have it.
Okay.
Like all the banners on the internet, all the posters, all the bus stops, everything. And you can display a message on all of them at the same time around the world. What does it say?
That's very hard. If it's all the advertising and everywhere, which means you'll see it everywhere, all around you.
Yeah.
Just have one word: live.
Live. That's beautiful. Now, this question, the next one, is not really a question, it's more like an open microphone. So if there is something that I didn't ask you, or a message that you want to share with the world related to Project DEFY or Nooks or anything else, this is kind of an open stage for you. And imagine it's not me asking, it's kind of you talking directly to the person that will listen this podcast or be on a commute somewhere and hear your voice. So you talk directly to them.
Great. In that case, if you are somebody who's wondering about education and trying to think about it, look at it, do something in it, change it, modify it, morph it, or whatever, I really, really strongly recommend, forget all that I've said so far. Just look at the history of education. Just look at where schools come from. How did they get started? That is all the evidence you need to make up your mind about whether things are working or not. And there's enough evidence for it. So looking at the system of education, and also when systems of education have not existed, what happened? How did people still learn? Learning never stopped. You can't stop learning. You can, but education sometimes seems to slow it down. Seems to create biases against certain things that the industry doesn't want, and then you can't do it anymore. You can't use it anymore, only because it's a block in your head. But learning will happen. Do you think if you don't go to school, you will not learn? I really doubt that. The kids in here are perfect examples of it, and they're doing it. So don't take my word for it. Just read history and see what was done to us in terms of our schools.
Thank you for the message. Now, the very last question: where can people find more information about you, Project DEFY? How can they get in touch? Maybe you need some specific support.
Yes, we do have a website called Project DEFY, projectdefy.org. That's the easiest way to reach out to us. We're also on Facebook with Project DEFY is the name. Message us, write to us. You can email at info@projectdefy.org. And anything, even if it is something that you want to do and it will not really help us, still write to us. We are more than happy to help other people start their own journeys in learning without anything coming to us in return. That is totally fine, because anyway, it needs more people, and we're more than happy to do that. So whatever you need, if you need a Nook to be created or need to understand or create your own systems, let us know. We are very, very happy to talk.
Abhijit, it was a pleasure to be here today. I really regret that I don't have more time to stay overnight to interact with the kids. And to everyone listening, I hope one day there is a certain technology or medium where you can pass, emotions and energy from places you go around the world, because, audio and pictures are not enough. I got some pictures. I'll try to take some more on the way out as we leave to the airport. But it was an amazing time here. And I wish you all the best with Project DEFY. It's really inspiring what you do. And yeah, if you need any support, reach out to the community. We'll try to engage people and help.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.